Welcome to Webcertain TV. I'm Gemma Houghton, and today I'm here with Bastian Grimm from PCase, and we're going to be talking about what's currently going on with Google and some of the things to be thinking about when you're managing SEO for large websites. Hi,
Thanks
Bastian.
for having me. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
So a big topic at the moment is obviously Google's mobile first index and the switch over from desktop to mobile. So what, from your perspective, are the kind of most important things happening with that at the moment? What are the key things that all businesses should be doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, it kind of feels like a very, very big, it's a project. They're trying to accomplish loads of things at once, but obviously on the other hand, kind of taking their time to do things, which is also a bit rare compared to what we have seen in the past, right? Mm-hmm. So we had, kind of algorithm updates, and I'm not saying this is one, but we had those, and they were there with a bang, and then that was it. And I think for this mobile first, I mean, we're talking about that for like probably a year, even more.
Longer, yeah.
And I think the idea, the general idea and the concept is that Google figured that at some point, obviously mobile traffic or traffic from mobile devices kind of surpassed desktop, and then the experience you kind of searching on Google and ending up on a desktop site, but you're using that mobile device is probably not the best thing in the world. So at some point, I think that makes sense to switch over and say like, okay, we need to use, the mobile experience, the mobile website, the mobile output, and evaluate that and rank you based on that, not as they're doing it today and taking the desktop version and then only maybe kind of calculating some mobile differences. So I think the idea to turn that around makes a lot of sense, but obviously, on the same hand, that's also quite a significant kind of project to undertake because they have to switch out all the sites at some point. So I think, the concept or the way it works right now is that they're trying to discover, is there a desktop mobile parity really? And if there is, then what's going to happen in the future is that they're going to take their mobile user agent and then crawl, and rank and index the mobile experience and score you based on that, and then also. That's obviously connected to loads of other things. So think web performance, for example, where they now also use the desktop and will be moving over to mobile as well. So, from a practical standpoint, I think we have probably 3 different types of scenarios. So we have like the responsive website. That's one URL, content and all the stuff is the same.
And that's what Google's ideally recommending.
Yeah, exactly. They're kind of preaching that for quite a while, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to go because you actually have less to worry about because that is more or less all in sync. I think it has some implications. Performance for responsive sites is a bit harder to accomplish because you just have different things to deal with. Yeah. Then the second scenario is the classic, we have an m dot subdomain and we have the dot and they're linked with rel alternate, rel canonical. So in that case, I think you have a bit more work to do because oftentimes those are different. And if they then now are going to rank you or index and rank you based on the mobile site, which has, less content or, schema markup is missing, so then there's just less info, right? So you need to make sure that those are in sync. I think that's the bigger task. And then the third is probably the rarest one is what we call dynamic serving. So we have the one URL, but it's reacting based on the user agent and then serves different things. So I think that's probably the hardest to maintain. Also, I was never really a fan, to be very honest, because that's like really, errors can happen quite quickly.
Well, and you're giving out multiple signals then to the search engine, so it makes it's not just saying this is the content, put it somewhere. You are kind of expecting them to figure it out, and that's not always going to work. Yeah,
exactly. So, I mean, even though Google says like all 3 versions are fine to go with, and I'd say if you take good care of the latter 2, you're okay. But I would probably recommend a responsive approach. It's just also because, if you look at it from an m dot versus dot perspective, what's the screen size you built the m dot for? Because also the mobile devices have different resolutions, right? Yeah. So I think responsive with like proper viewports and proper kind of breakpoints, that's probably the best way to go.
Yeah. But if you've already got a mobile site that's working for you, there's obviously no panic. You don't need to go out.
No, absolutely not. I mean,
you can.
No, that's true, and it would cause a lot of work. And I think also Google said like, kind of they are fine. We're not really in a rush, and I think that makes sense because at the end of the day, we all know that there's priorities and other work as well. It's not just like who says we go mobile first, and everyone is switching that over.
Yeah, and to make such a big change like that could really do damage to sites if they're not already.
Totally. I mean, the good thing, to be fair, is that in this case they really started the announcements quite early. Yeah. And what I really like is that now apparently they also even are going to notify us in Search Console, kind of FYI, we switched you over, because that in the past was like, we're not going to do that, right? So we had the statements like, yeah, no, we switch you over. We might notify you if kind of things break. Where I was always like, yeah, that's great. So how am I going to figure out, you know, have I been switched? Have I not been switched?
Yeah, and then something might have broken, but you don't know why.
Exactly. So I think that's actually really good, also in terms of transparency and just helping kind of the average website owner to understand, okay, I've been switched over, because it has implications, right? So data might be different. So if you look at that from a Search Console perspective, all of a sudden you might see like the dot is, you know, no traffic anymore and everything spikes up on the M.dot. But if you don't know that, you know, you think your data's gone. So I think the notification is actually a really good thing. Yeah.
And how, if they kind of said they've started already to move some sites over and that nobody's really noticed, but how does that work from the point of view that if they're still producing one you know, SERP result for a certain keyword, some of the sites might be ranked on mobile first, some on desktop first. So are the ones that are mobile first going to have an advantage now, do you think? Or how, you know, how does that actually work? Because it seems like quite a complicated...
It does indeed. I mean, so what they're saying or proclaiming is that they're using kind of the same ranking factors, which I think is also a bit interesting because, you know, on desktop we had this, like, if you recall, we had this strong recommendation of not hiding kind of content behind, you know, tab switches or carousels, right? So there was like a clear statement that, yes, we might index that, but it might be valued less, right? But then obviously everyone was like, yeah, how is it going to work on mobile? Because, you know, that's a very common UX element to kind of, you know, swipe or have the carousel or this expanders, because, you know, mobile, you just have last screen real estate, so you just need those. And then they said it's fine. So I think there might be also slight differences in what we kind of call ranking factors, I guess. From a technical perspective, I think what they do is they just take, you know, depending on the device that's accessing or where you're using the SERP in, they will understand if it's kind of a mobile output or desktop output. But you're right, essentially they would need to kind of merge the signals and just not really care about, you know, if it's a desktop or mobile, because that should be the same one SERP actually. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, how they actually do it is, I guess we'll never know, but
probably not. Yeah.
Need to see.
Have you seen that? There was the EU is now proclaiming that Google actually is supposed to open up their ranking algorithm. And I was like, yeah, as if that's going to happen. So that was really funny.
Yeah.
So I think as you say, we're probably never going to know. So.
And then you mentioned again one of the challenges about if you do working on an M.dot site and a desktop site, that you've got to make sure that all your tags and all of your kind of connections are working properly. And that's something for international sites is a big deal because you're working with hreflang in many cases. Yeah. And we've seen at the International Search Summit numerous times, John and Gary and other people presenting the complex kind of linking back and forth and to and from. What, in your experience, how well is that kind of hreflang working? What are the big mistakes that businesses are making with that one? Yeah,
I think this is really kind of a very, very, very complex, technically really hard thing to get right. I totally agree on that, and it's like it causes a lot of headache, I'd say. Yeah. We see like in loads of audits that we do when we have kind of international properties where we look at that hreflang is really hard to get right, which I think the main reason is that there's so many like tag relations back and forth, and then obviously also the other problem is that, I mean, Google needs to recrawl each and every of those relations to understand what has been changed and if they are all in sync. And then, as we know, there's no streamlined kind of crawling, so that just, you know, one URL might be crawled way later than the other. So this hreflang relation is broken for the time being. And then you think you did something wrong, but apparently maybe you even didn't. So I think there's lots of different aspects to it. I mean, the most common things that we see that go wrong, like the easiest ones to fix probably are just the wrong annotations. So UK and GB and the shortcodes, that's just very different things. Yeah. So I think so just following the ISO standards, which are at least I think documented all right, but so following that is the one thing. But also the idea of, you know, how broad or how specific are you going to go? Like, I mean, you could do German in like DE, or you could do something like, you know, just German region specific, which is just DE, but then that's also targeting, you know, Austria and Switzerland. So, you know, what is it that you really want to achieve? And, you know, what's your fallback? So we're talking about the X default annotation. So I think just the concept behind it to get that right is not really as easy as it seems at first glance. And then the bigger it gets, I mean, at some point, then you're talking about problems that you're kind of bloating up your source code like crazy, especially then again, coming back to mobile.
Yeah.
You know, we have like roughly 14 kilobyte for the first like paint to happen. So if you bloat up your hat with like, I don't know, we have seen sites with 30, 40 annotations, that's crazy amount of kind of markup that will be generated. So then we probably need to move that into a sitemap, but then sitemaps again, they need to be really well done. Otherwise, Google is going to ignore that, you know, if you're not canonicalizing properly. So I think there's just really a lot of dimensions to it, and it's just a case-by-case thing that you need to understand. So what's the setup? How is that site or those sites working? And then you kind of need to develop from there. What's really great, though, I think, is that where they really made good efforts is that you can host kind of sitemaps on a kind of a third-party domain. So essentially, if you have someone kind of to build that out for you, that can probably take loads of headache away from just your core business. But yeah, generally, I think the concept and get the concept right and get a strategy rolled out is really not as easy in the first place. Yeah.
No, and it seems that, maybe that's what's been not understood by people is that, oh, here's a solution, right, great, we'll just plop all this code on a page and hope for the best. And actually, that makes it worse often, not better.
Yeah, but you know, I think it should not really be a surprise for Google on the other side. If you look at, you know, how other tags are kind of, I wouldn't say misused, but how often, you know, stuff is wrong with like simple annotations. Take canonical tags, right? You see all of a sudden you see relative canonical tags, you know, no protocol, no nothing, or you see just, you know, broken URLs, you see changes, you see loops, all of that stuff that's not supposed to happen with a simple one-line tag. And if you think then the dimensions that hreflang can cause, I'm not really surprised that this is actually a big thing and hard to get right. Yeah.
And then you mentioned there that by having a lot of code that can slow things down, and performance is obviously always quite a big topic and something that's only ever going to get important with mobile first and all of that. It's increasingly important. What has changed in that side of things, you know, maybe in the last year or so? What are the most important things now to be really focusing on from a performance point of view?
I think where Google really made big efforts is A, with obviously AMPs, but B also from the other side. So with Chrome, so on the browser level, they really kind of are pushing towards just better, you know, measurement, better, you know, how can I track what's actually really going on? Because we all know that this kind of, you know, just relying on a single score, I don't know, PageSpeed Insights or something, is probably not the best way to do it, because, you know, it's that not one number, but it doesn't tell you really much. It's not really actionable. Yeah. So what they did in Chrome a couple of months ago, actually, is something that they introduced something that they call the Performance Observer, and the idea is that it measures, you know, how a site is building up on the screen with like different kind of painting stages. So when do you see something? When do you see like a really useful element, etc., etc. So when is the site actually being ready for use? And I think measuring those timings is really a great way to move towards, you know, how do you perceive how fast the site actually is. So I think there's loads of stuff going on that side. And then on the AMP side of things, I mean, obviously they're pushing that like crazy. I mean, that's probably not really new, but I'd say that kind of continued in the last 12 months as well.
Yeah, we're kind of almost waiting for that to die down a bit, and it just doesn't.
No, it's not really. I think that's like wherever you look at, you know, events or, you know, also Google messaging just in general, I think they're really kind of sticking with the story that, you know, performance is important, which I do agree. I think, you know, load times and fast responses are important, but I'm not entirely sure if AMP is always the right answer. I think first and foremost, it should be the own property that needs to be fast, because you want like a thorough kind of speedy experience. So I want to click, I want to navigate, I want to get there quickly and not just have this one entry coming from a search result page.
So really fast, thinking about your own, not just kind of looking at AMP as an easy fix, or not that easy, but you know, right, we'll just create AMP pages and that'll be fine. Actually, you should be maybe thinking about looking at, you know, your overall website, because actually if you can improve that enough, you may not need, depending on what, you know, industry you're in, etc., AMP may not be really that required. Yeah,
I think you made a very, very fair point there. I mean, there's two industries, I'd say right now at least specifically, especially in publishing, and then also there's the recipe cooking vertical. I think there's no way around AMP, unfortunately, right? If you want in the top carousel and you need that as a publisher, then you can't say no to AMPs. And I think that's okay as long as you understand what's happening there. But, you know, ultimately, I think AMP should not be the answer to everything. As you said, like, get your stuff in a row first. And I've seen, unfortunately, sites that go full AMP but are still slow because they're just like ignoring basics, caching, compression, stuff that we've been talking about for years and years. So really, I think with basics still, you can get like 80-90% out of the way, and that's better than most of the average sites. So I think AMP, it's not that silver bullet really. It is an add-on, and that I like, and I think that makes sense on some verticals. But I would not solely rely on AMP, especially now. I mean, with the latest announcement, it's kind of, I wouldn't say a confession, but at least it's a good hint that AMP actually mainly is fast because Google makes it fast in the sense of, okay, you go to to search results and they're actually preloading the AMP stories. So that perceived speed is amazing because it's like it's there. It's same as
they could
Facebook.
do that with any other website.
That's the point, right? That's exactly the point. And I think that's what might happen in the future with now web packaging and the kind of new standards they're looking into. That eventually, or hopefully maybe, we're kind of not really stuck into that one format, but rather, when you stick to certain restrictions, and that's not necessarily within the AMP framework, but like generally in like performance restrictions that do make sense, that they then would allow the same experience. And I think that would be great then.
Yeah, well,
we'll see.
Wait to see whether that happens.
Yeah. True.
But yeah, regardless then of everything else that you're working on, if you any SEO, any website owner really needs to be constantly looking at these areas at mobile, about speed. It's all about making that as fast and as easy for the user as possible, and that's only going to get more important, I guess.
Yeah, true. That's not going to go away. I doubt that's the case, really. Yeah.
Good. Oh well, thank
Great.
you again for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.